I had spent all morning setting things up. The grill was already warm, the chairs were spread out under the shade of the pecan tree, and the scent of ribs slow cooking filled the yard. Laughter echoed. My nephews ran barefoot through the grass, squealing as they dodged water balloons. It was a southern Sunday in every sense, the kind that made you forget life ever got complicated. Hosting these family BBQs had become a tradition. My little sanctuary, my garden, was the one place I could pretend everything was all right, at least for a few hours. My sister Alicia and her husband Greg showed up fashionably late, of course. They always walked in like they were doing us a favor by being there. Greg wore his usual smug grin, sunglasses still on, even though the clouds were thickening. He strutted into my yard and walked straight to the grill. Didn't ask, just flipped the ribs I'd been tending to all morning. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. This wasn't new. He always touched what wasn't his, my tools, my music playlist, my peace. I told myself what I always did. It's just one day. Be gracious. Be patient. Inside, I started slicing watermelon in the kitchen when I heard voices rising. Alicia and Greg, again. Their fights were like static, constant background noise I learned to tune out. I could only make out bits. You never listen. That's not what I said. The usual. Then his voice cut through the house like a blade. Don't argue with my wife in her house. It echoed. The room went silent. Even the kids outside stopped yelling. I stood there, frozen. Her house? I turned slowly, walked out into the hallway where everyone had gone still. My hands were damp from the watermelon. I wiped them on a towel and walked into the living room where Greg stood, puffed up like a rooster. This is my house, I said, calm but firm. It's under my name, bought with my savings. Please speak respectfully while you're in it. He didn't blink, just looked me up and down and muttered, whatever. That hurt more than the outburst. The dismissal, like I was a waitress in my own home. Later, as the sun began to dip and paper plates piled up on the counter, I overheard him in the garage, laughing with my brother. She finally thinks she matters. Must be menopause, he joked. The words didn't come at me like a slap. No, they landed like a slow ache. Deep, methodical, planned. He said it to humiliate me, and he wasn't whispering. I stood behind the door, hand clenched around a stack of towels, pretending I hadn't heard. But I had. I always heard. I just never said anything. And then I heard something else. Laughter. Familiar. My sister. Alicia laughed with him. She heard it too. And she chose him. All these years, I thought maybe she didn't know how he treated me. Maybe she didn't notice the microcuts. But she did. And she didn't care. I walked back inside slowly, passing the sink full of greasy dishes, the last of the kids begging for another soda. I set the towels down and sat at the dining table alone. The chairs were still warm from bodies, but the room felt empty. I stared at the wood grain in front of me, tracing it with my eyes. They'll never respect you until you stop letting them treat you this way. My father's voice came to me, clear as day. He used to say that when I was younger, when I'd let friends take advantage of me in school, respect, he told me once, isn't given. It's taken. The day you draw your line in the sand, that's the day they'll back off. I thought I had drawn mine by staying calm, by being the bigger person. But maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe being silent wasn't noble. Maybe it was permission. I sat there a long while, the lights dimming as the sun fully disappeared. My ribs had gone cold. The laughter outside had faded. Greg and Alicia were gone, along with the rest of them. I got up, locked the front door, turned off the porch light, moved slowly, deliberately. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't crying, I was deciding. Next time they come back, things will be different. Not louder, but firmer. Not cruel, but clearer. This BBQ was the last time my silence gave them comfort. That night, I locked my bedroom door, not for safety, but to keep my resolve from escaping. The house felt foreign the next morning. Still, heavy, like the air hadn't moved since last night. Sunlight leaked through the blinds, touching everything that had been left out. Dirty plates, half-empty cups, a half-burnt citronella candle. I stepped barefoot across the living room and felt crumbs stick to my skin. That small detail made me stop. They didn't even clean up after themselves. The sink was packed with dishes, barbecue sauce hardened on the rims. One of Greg's beer cans sat on the mantel next to a family photo. The audacity of it. I started walking room to room, picking things up, not out of habit, but because now I noticed. The chair pulled out at the wrong angle. A cushion tossed aside. The house wore their presence like bruises. My head throbbed, not from wine, I hadn't had more than one glass, but from the weight of yesterday. Stress that settled behind the eyes. An emotional hangover. I stepped out back, and the grass was flat where kids had stomped through it. My flower bed had a plastic cup lodged in it. I stood there a moment, barefoot on the deck, arms folded. Something was changing. I wasn't just tired, I was aware. While washing a plate, I found myself thinking back, way back, to the graduation party we held for Alicia. I was 18, fresh out of high school, and I'd planned every detail. I set the tables, chose the music, even baked the cake. But when family thanked her for how nice everything was, she smiled and said, "Glad y'all enjoyed it," like she'd done it all herself. That wasn't new. I'd always been the helper, the background character in my own story. Grandma used to say, "Silence keeps peace, but it doesn't build respect." I didn't get it back then. I do now. I bent down to pick up a napkin wedged between the couch cushions and noticed an envelope. Torn open, my name printed on it. It was one of those tax notices from the county office. Property tax. Due soon. Except, it had already been opened. Inside was a sticky note in Greg's handwriting. Handled this year. That sick feeling came back. My house. My name. Why was he in the middle of that? I sat on the floor with it in my lap, not just upset, betrayed. He wasn't just loud, he was invasive. And Alicia, she let him. Back in the kitchen, I kept cleaning, but now it was mechanical. My thoughts ran wild. I thought about what I could have said last night, how I should have corrected him sooner, replayed it in my head like a courtroom cross-examination. You speak like this because no one stopped you. This isn't your space to claim. But instead, I'd gone quiet. Again, I poured coffee and stared out the window. An old phrase came to mind. One my dad liked. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'd been fooled. Twice, maybe more. What really sat with me wasn't Greg's voice yelling through the house. It was Alicia's silence. Her laugh at my expense. She stood by him even when I was the one they mocked. That stung deeper than the rest. The phone buzzed, a voicemail from her. I didn't want to hear it, but I listened anyway. Her voice was light, falsely sweet. You know he didn't mean it. Don't overreact. It was just a rough day. Let it go, okay? Let it go. I played it again, then deleted it. That message told me everything I needed. She wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to stop. And I wasn't going to sit through another barbecue pretending I didn't exist. At the kitchen table, I started pulling out papers, deeds, receipts, texts. I wasn't sure why yet, but something inside me said to gather them. Evidence. Not for court, not for drama, but for clarity. I wanted a picture of everything I'd built, and everything they'd chipped away at. I opened a folder and laid out the documents in front of me. His name wasn't on any of it, not one paper. But he walked through here like he owned it, like I owed him. Maya Angelou's words echoed. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I used to brush things off, call them accidents, isolated moments. Not anymore. The version of me that made excuses for people, she's not here anymore. I wasn't angry, not in the way people think of anger. I felt steady, calm, cold even, like when a wound stops bleeding, not because it's healed, but because it's closed. I folded the papers, clipped them together, and placed them in a drawer. My drawer. The next move wasn't clear yet, but I'd made the first one. Later that night, I lay in bed, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. A message. Not from Alicia, not from Greg, a stranger. No name. Just a few words. Thought you should know the truth about your sister.
It was past midnight when I saw it, just as I was about to plug in my phone and turn off the lamp.
A notification blinked on the screen, and I almost ignored it. But the name stopped me cold. Orla. I hadn't heard from her in over 10 years. She used to be my safe place, the one person who knew how to read my silence without prying it open. We lost touch, and I'd assumed that was permanent. Her message was short, just one line. I know what Corwin's been doing behind the scenes. Call me. I stared at the screen so long the light dimmed. My heart thudded against my chest, not out of fear, but anticipation. What could she possibly know? And why now? For a second, I thought about deleting it. Drama wasn't what I needed. I'd just started feeling grounded. But then I remembered what I told myself the night of the barbecue. No more silence. I didn't call that night. I needed to sleep, to think. But by morning, the tension hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. I dialed her number around 8 a.m. She picked up after one ring. "Hey," she said, cautious but steady. "I didn't think you would call." "I almost didn't," I replied. "But I'm tired of being the last to know." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "I saw the party. From the street. I wasn't invited. Just wanted to see how you were doing. You didn't look happy." "No, I wasn't," I said, flatly. Orla didn't waste time. "I need to tell you something. Corwin's been using your address. He listed your home as collateral for a loan." My stomach flipped. "What kind of loan?" "A business loan. New LLC. Paperwork lists him as co-owner of the property. He's leveraged your house, and you didn't sign anything, right?" I didn't answer right away. My mind reeled. I hadn't signed anything, not knowingly. But the tax envelope, the tone in his voice, the way he moved through my home like it belonged to him, it all came rushing back. "No, I didn't," I said quietly. "I can get you copies," Orla continued. "A friend of mine works at City Records. She flagged it. She knew you wouldn't approve that." My throat tightened. I managed a weak, "Thank you." "I hated staying silent," she said. "But I didn't know if you'd trust me again." I did now. She wasn't the one who betrayed me. By noon, I called Lenore. She answered with a bright, "Hey, sis," like nothing was wrong. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Why is Corwin using my address to apply for a loan?" The line went quiet for a beat. Then her tone shifted, flat, defensive. "You're overreacting. We did what made sense. It's all for the family." "The family?" I echoed. "You mean your husband's business?" "Don't be petty," she snapped. "You're not using that equity. We thought, no, you didn't think, you assumed, that's the difference." I ended the call. No screaming, no tears, just the click of the button. My hand trembled as I put the phone down. They didn't think they were wrong. That was the part that burned the most, not the act, but the entitlement, like it was natural to claim what wasn't theirs, like I should be grateful for being included. Later that night, I opened my laptop. No music, no lights, just the screen glow. I searched the county database, found the LLC. There it was, my address, his name, listed together. No one asked me. I pulled out a shoebox from the hall closet, the one I hadn't touched since Dad passed. Inside were folders, house deeds, letters, a photo of him standing in front of the porch when we signed the papers, his trust, his pride. That house wasn't just property, it was history, my inheritance, his belief in me. I opened a new folder on my desk, printed documents, screenshots, voicemails, the voicemail from Lenore, the city records. I didn't know where it was heading yet, but I knew I needed everything. You don't need to shout to be dangerous. That thought kept ringing in my head. It felt like a line written on my spine. This wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. This was about reclaiming what was mine and making sure no one else wrote my story while I sat silent. As I slid the last paper into its plastic sleeve, I looked toward the front door. Because something told me I wasn't the only one gathering proof. I got home just after 6. The sun was low enough to cast long, soft shadows across the living room wall. That kind of light used to make me feel safe, but not tonight. I tossed my keys into the bowl and stood still for a beat. Something felt off. There was a folder on the coffee table I hadn't touched since Sunday. It had been moved, just slightly, but I noticed. A missing piece of junk mail from the stack near the door. A new utility bill I never got the email for, but somehow the physical copy sat opened on my kitchen counter. None of it screamed out loud, but each detail whispered the same thing. Someone was paying attention to my routine. Someone was slipping through cracks I didn't realize I'd left open. I walked through the house slowly, hand brushing over the edges of picture frames, chair backs. I paused in the kitchen. That corner, where Corwin had raised his voice 2 nights ago, that air hadn't cleared. It lingered, stale and sharp, like something rotting beneath the floorboards. I leaned against the fridge, eyes half closed. They think I'm paralyzed by silence, but I'm just getting ready. Upstairs, I closed the door to my office and pulled Orla's folder out from the locked drawer. Pages slid under my fingers like dry leaves, scanned deeds, city records, notary logs. I combed through every date, every signature. I knew my handwriting. I knew what year I was in Nashville on business and what day I'd signed for a FedEx package 300 miles away. And there it was, an amendment filed during the week I was out of state, slipped into a revision stack with Corwin's name next to mine. It looked official, neat, professional, but I hadn't signed that page. My eyes burned from reading, but I couldn't stop. There it was, his name listed as co-owner, filed with the county clerk, buried in the system where only someone watching closely, like Orla's contact, would catch it. This was no misunderstanding. This was calculated. I leaned back, pulse steady but low. I wasn't angry in the way I used to be, hot, explosive. This was colder, cleaner, more exact. I didn't say a word to Lenore that night, or Corwin. I didn't text Orla. I just slid that paper into a separate folder and tucked it beneath Dad's old box, locking it away again. Tomorrow, I'd let it breathe. Tonight, it stayed mine. The next day at lunch, I casually asked Corwin, "Hey, just wondering, are we splitting the power bill now?" He blinked. "What?" I saw it was in both our names. He gave a half laugh. "Oh, must be a clerical thing. Don't worry about it." Lenore chimed in from across the room. "You're being overly cautious again. It's not that serious." But I saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the tightness in her jaw. They were feeling the pressure. "Just asking," I smiled. "If I'm sharing responsibility, I deserve transparency, right?" He nodded, slow, but said nothing. She busied herself with a coffee mug that didn't need cleaning. Later that evening, I opened a draft email to the county title office. Didn't send it, just saved it. Sometimes pressure is louder when it's quiet. Back in my office, I turned on the lamp and pulled out the old wooden drawer where Dad's papers were kept. His name was still there, bold and clean. I ran my thumb across the edge of the original deed. My hand settled over it like a prayer. "This house was always yours, Dad," I whispered. Then I pulled out the falsified amendment, set it next to his. 2 stories. One truth. I didn't rush, didn't explode. Tomorrow, I'd ask for a meeting. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't yell. I'd show them the paper. No fear, no begging. Just proof. And in that stillness, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Not in panic, but power. But the calm didn't last. Because early the next morning, before coffee, before shoes, before I even touched my keys, there was a note on my windshield. 3 words, "You're warned." I woke before dawn. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I lay in bed, unmoving, replaying the amendment I found last night, the hidden lean, the look in Alicia's eyes. My chest felt tight, like a coil ready to snap. I sat up slowly and rubbed my temples. My thoughts raced wild. Who looked through my drawers? When did they slip into my home? I swung my legs over the side and stood, bare feet on cold wood floor. The memory of locking that door lingered, but locks don't stop someone who already has a key. Still, this time, they'd need more than access. They'd need proof. Stepping outside, I saw it. A neon yellow sticky note stuck under my windshield wiper. "You're warned." I froze in place. I scanned the empty street, no cars, no footprints in dew-slick grass. The note looked almost like a juvenile prank, but the weight of threat pressed in. Someone wanted me off balance. Threatening in daylight, not hidden. It felt like a test. an invitation to step back. But I wasn't stepping back anymore. Instead, I made a vow. I would move smarter, document everything, let no room for doubt. I drove to the county title office midday, the sticky note burning in my mind. I walked in purposeful, but with quiet nerves. At the records counter, an older clerk named Martin greeted me. His manner was polite but cautious. He saw me holding the two documents, my original deed and the suspect amendment. I handed them over, careful to watch his reaction. Martin's brows lifted. He studied the pages. Then, quietly, "This notary." He trailed off. I watched him flip through the amendment. He said, "This notary retired 5 years before this signature date." My pulse jumped. A notary signing after retirement, a forged seal. It was the kind of misstep someone desperate would make. He leaned close, voice lowered. "Be careful with this. People who fake signatures often escalate. This is serious. Don't let it go unchecked." His eyes held concern. That validation hit like adrenaline. I nodded and left, papers tucked close, heart pounding with a fierce clarity. This wasn't just about family now. It was about legal violation and exposure. Returning home, I opened the front door and paused. A draft of air brushed my face. The latch wasn't locked halfway, but ajar. Nothing seemed missing. The room looked in order. Still, I felt the alarm in me. I called Kelly quietly, my old friend in real estate law, and asked her to meet tomorrow. Then I positioned a small hidden camera in the hallway, taped discreetly behind a corner. If they crept in again, I would see. I whispered into the empty room, "You've taken enough." My voice cracked from holding in so much. Later, my phone dimmed with a message from an unknown number. "Drop it before it gets messy." I stared at those words, fingers trembling. Then I screenshotted, backed up, sent copies to Orla. I felt the shift. What started as a family dispute was becoming a legal fight, one I wasn't afraid to take on. At dusk, I called Kelly back. She agreed to come by tomorrow evening. I hung up and looked around the house I love, walls that once held laughter, now thick with secrets. Before bed, I checked the camera feed. A shadow flickered across the hallway, just for a moment, then vanished. My heart stayed racing, but something else had settled, resolve. It was nearly 10 when I finally sat down at the desk again. The binder lay open, its pages neatly arranged, every detail sorted. Screenshots, utility bills, email threads, notarized dates. The kind of folder people call too prepared. But not when you've been lied to. The house was quiet, lights dim. The wind outside made the window creak, and for a moment, I just listened. I thought about the night Corwin filed that amendment. Where was I? Denver. Conference week. I remembered the hotel wallpaper, the stale buffet eggs, and calling home to check on the dog, not realizing my house was becoming his. I glanced at the clock. 10:03. My heart thudded harder with each passing minute. Then, 3 firm knocks. No doorbell. No text ahead. I pushed back my chair slowly, stood, and walked toward the door. My hand hovered above the knob, then turned. There he was, Corwin, clean-shaven, calm on the outside. His voice was soft. "Hey, can we talk?" His eyes, though, flicked too quickly around the porch. I stepped aside. He walked in like it was still his home, not even a pause. I didn't offer a drink. I didn't ask why he was here. I just asked, "Why did you sign my name on the deed?" He blinked, then smiled. The one I used to believe meant reassurance, not calculation. "You're being dramatic," he said. "It was just a technicality. I meant to talk to you." "No, Corwin, you filed false documents. That's not a technicality. That's fraud." I picked up the binder and flipped it open. "This is your version. And here, this is the original deed, the one Dad left to me, unchanged." His face hardened. The act slipped. "You don't understand how this works, Verena." "I understand better than you think," I said. My voice was steady. "You thought I'd let it slide, that I'd stay quiet." He laughed, once, dry, mean. "You're really going to humiliate us over a house?" I didn't move. "You humiliated yourselves. I'm just catching up." His smile twisted. You don't know who I talk to, what I can pull. You think neighbors want the drama? You think threats work on me now? I said. I'm not that woman anymore. Just then, the front door creaked open behind him. Lenore stood there, still in her heels from work, clutching her purse like a shield. Her eyes darted between us. What's going on? Corwin didn't turn around. I watched her face shift. First confusion, then realization. She saw the documents. She saw the binder. She didn't speak. I turned toward her. Did you know? She didn't answer. But her silence said enough. I reached into the binder and handed Corwin the original deed. You're going to return what's mine. Tonight. His jaw tensed. You'll regret this. No, I said. I already regret trusting you. He grabbed the document, shoved it into his coat, and stormed past Lenore out the door. She stayed frozen in place. Her mouth opened once, maybe to apologize, maybe to lie, but she said nothing. I stood in the doorway, watching his taillights disappear down the street. My legs shook, but I didn't fall. I walked into the hallway, each step heavy with change. The house didn't feel like the same space anymore. It felt like mine again, for the first time in years. In the quiet, I remembered something Dad once told me. Your silence never built anything, only walls. And tonight, I had broken one. I locked the door, went back to the desk, checked the camera feed, and saw a faint figure, barely a shadow, linger outside for a beat too long, then vanish. My breath was finally steady, until the phone buzzed. A forwarded email lit the screen. Public notice. I woke before the sun even rose. There was no peace in sleep anymore, just restless fragments of what was said, what still needed to be. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, but I ignored it. My mind wasn't on meetings or errands. It was on the voice in that voicemail, the silent rooms, the footprints outside the night before. I pulled the binder closer, flipped through the pages, each one now like armor. Timestamps, names, patterns. I pressed play on the audio I'd saved, the conversation Corwin didn't know I'd recorded. His smug voice, dancing around the truth, assuming I'd never push back. I saved it to 3 different drives, one on a USB, one on the cloud, one on my phone. Through the window, I watched our street come alive. Joggers, sprinklers, neighbors walking dogs. None of them knew what boiled inside this house. None of them saw how polite smiles masked a family splintering under its own secrets. I remembered something Dad used to say, a storm hits hardest just before it clears. He wasn't wrong. That afternoon, my mother texted, a dinner invite, family only, framed like peace offering. I knew what it was, another staged intervention where I'd be asked to tone things down. The kind of evening where they'd talk around the fire like I was the unreasonable one, like lies and threats could be covered with a roast chicken and fake concern. Still, I went, because hiding never helped anything, and because if this was going to blow open, I wanted it to happen on my terms. The house was crowded by early evening. Mom had lit candles, set out place cards. Corwin and Lenore sat across from me, chatting casually with my aunt about lawn care like none of this was happening. I poured myself a glass of water and waited. Dinner started with compliments about the food, then it turned. Corwin asked, too smoothly. So, Verena, have you looked into what legal fees might cost you if this keeps going? I smiled, but didn't answer. Lenore chimed in, laughing. She's been busy guarding the dining room chairs like they're gold bars. My mother added, it's just stress talking. We're all under pressure. I set my fork down. If we're going to eat in my house, I said, standing slowly, then we're going to speak truthfully. Silence swept the table. Then, Lenore's phone rang. She looked at the screen, frowned, and stepped out. When she returned, she was pale. Eyes a little wide, unsure. I didn't wait. I pulled my phone out, tapped on a voicemail, and set it on the table. This one's from Mom, I said. From 3 nights ago. It played, quiet at first, then clear. I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should have asked more questions before signing that insurance form. I didn't want to believe they'd do that to you. but I see now. Every face changed, and Corwin leaned back, jaw tightening. Lenore stared at the table. Mom's mouth opened, but no words came. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The air in the room had shifted, and not in their favor. I closed the app. I'll be filing for a full title review next week, I said. Until then, Corwin and Lenore, you'll remove your names from anything shared. Utilities, deed claims, access, everything. Lenore whispered, "You'd cut us out over this?" I turned to her. "You cut me out a long time ago. I'm just cleaning up." I stood taller. Justice delayed is not justice denied. I looked around the table once more. I have the receipts, I have the recordings, and I'm done waiting for anyone here to grow a conscience. Corwin's eyes burned, but he didn't speak. Lenore looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't. I walked out the back door into the yard. The evening breeze was cooler now, a shift in the weather. I stood there, quiet, hands in my pockets. My phone buzzed again. Court hearing. 24 hours. I woke long before dawn. The room still black, the street outside silent. My binder lay open on the table, papers fanned like a deck of cards. Emails, notarized copies, voice recordings, all marked and labeled. Kelly's notes, in her crisp handwriting, ran down the margin of my outline. Dates, statutes, words to emphasize. I moved slowly but deliberately, brushing the wrinkles from my jacket, choosing dark blue over black. Mom's voice echoed in my head, one of the few lessons I still carried from her. Dress how you want to be treated. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. My palms were damp, but my eyes looked steady. "I belong here," I whispered. "I belong here." I repeated it until my chest stopped tightening. My phone buzzed. Kelly's text. "I'm here. You've got this." That small message felt like a hand on my back. I locked the door, binder under my arm, and stepped into the cold morning with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Outside the courthouse, they were already there. Corwin and Lenore, side by side, flanked by a man in a charcoal suit, obvious attorney, obvious plan. They didn't look at me, they looked through me, smirks at the corners of their mouths. I inhaled, squared my shoulders, and walked past them into the marble lobby where Kelly stood waiting. She nodded once, like a coach before kickoff. The courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and old paper. The judge entered, a composed woman with silver hair and a gaze that made people straighten. She reminded me of my aunt, which oddly made me feel less invisible. Proceedings opened quickly. Their lawyer went first, his voice smooth as he recited a script. I was unstable. I'd misunderstood. This was a family matter, blown out of proportion. Every word a dart meant to pierce my credibility. I didn't flinch. I opened my binder, handed Kelly the forged signature page, the time-stamped property records, the notary's certification. Every crack in their story. When Kelly passed them to the bailiff, I watched the judge's eyes narrow. She tilted the page, reading the seal, then spoke slowly. "This notary stamp is dated 2 years after the notary's retirement." The room shifted. Corwin's fingers curled on the table. Lenore's lips pressed thin. Their lawyer coughed, tried to recover, but the judge raised her hand. Kelly stood, her voice low but steady, laying out elder coercion statutes, property fraud precedents, showing how each document fit the pattern. I listened as she turned their narrative inside out. The shame I'd carried began to burn off, replaced by something stronger, vindication laced with steel. Lenore tried to speak over her, eyes darting between me and the judge. "We were just trying to protect the family," she said. "It wasn't. Protection doesn't require a lie," the judge cut in, her tone firm enough to silence the room. Corwin shifted again, this time in anger. The judge looked directly at him. "Forgery is not a civil matter. It's criminal." No one spoke after that. The gavel rapped softly. "This court will recess to review the evidence. Counsel for the respondents. Prepare for potential criminal referral." When we stepped out into the courtyard, the air felt thinner, lighter. Kelly's hand found my shoulder. "You walked in doubted. You walked out standing," she said. Corwin barreled past without a glance, his lawyer at his heels. Lenore lingered a moment. Her eyes, once sharp, looked wet, distant, like she'd seen the ground give way beneath her. Even if the case wasn't finished, the truth was no longer buried. That alone shifted the weight I'd carried for months. I sat down on the courthouse steps, binder beside me, sun warming my face for the first time in what felt like years. A stranger paused near the bottom of the steps. "You held yourself well in there," he said softly. "Most folks don't." I met his eyes, managed a small smile. "I wasn't just fighting for the house," I whispered. "I was fighting for my place in the story." My phone buzzed again in my hand. An unknown number. The message read, "I think we need to talk." Privately, 2 weeks after the verdict, the house felt quiet but not empty. The judge's ruling had come with finality. The deed was officially mine. Corwin was fined for fraud, and Lenore left the courtroom without a word. No apology, no eye contact, just a closed door behind her, and silence that said everything she couldn't. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but what settled over me wasn't victory. It was quiet. A silence so deep it almost hummed, like the end of a long storm when the roof holds, but the windows are still streaked with rain. Neighbors I barely spoke to started leaving notes in my mailbox. "You were brave. You reminded us of decency. You spoke what we were too afraid to." One morning, I found a small article in the local paper, just a few paragraphs buried beneath city council updates. But it was enough to change something. People looked at me differently now. Not just the woman who lived on the edge of the block, but someone who'd stood up when it counted. I donated part of the restitution money to a local women's legal aid group, quietly, without fanfare. When I told Kelly, she smiled and said, "Sometimes you win so others can walk a little easier behind you." She was right. That mattered more than the money ever did. One warm afternoon, I sat with Mom on the porch. We hadn't talked much since court, not deeply, but that day, we let the words find us. Not sharp, not angry, just real. She admitted she'd seen things, signs, tension, odd conversations with Corwin, but hadn't known how to confront them. Said she felt paralyzed, torn between her children and her instincts. "I understand," I told her. "But being silent to keep peace means handing someone else the pen to write your story." She didn't argue, just reached for my hand. And for the first time in years, we hugged like mother and daughter, not as combatants on different sides of a battlefield. That same week, I emailed Helen, my cousin. We hadn't spoken since the division in the family began. She responded in less than a day. Her message was short but carried weight. "I always believed you. Thank you for standing up, even when we couldn't." Time kept moving. My 39th birthday came around. This time, the house wasn't tense, silent, or filled with people pretending to be family. It was filled with laughter, real, belly-deep laughter. Friends I chose. People who showed up not out of duty, but out of love. Kelly brought cupcakes, still warm. We raised our glasses and toasted to truth, chosen family, and fresh paint. I'd started redoing the living room, not to erase the memories, but to reclaim the space. The worn curtains were gone. The paint was a soft olive green, something alive. I was sitting at the table when I opened a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a single card, no apology, just a sentence. "I hope you found what you needed." It was from Lenore. I stared at it for a long time before slipping it into the back of my desk drawer. Not to forget, just to mark the distance, like a milepost on a road I'd already walked past. As the sun began to set that day, I went out back with a small sapling, a maple, dug the soil with bare hands, planted it near the fence line where I could see it from the kitchen window. A tree to grow where the hurt had once sat, roots to hold firm when everything else tried to uproot me. A few days later, I was asked to speak at a local community center. Nothing fancy, just a circle of folding chairs and people trying to understand their own rights, their own strength. I told my story, not for pity, but for power. Afterward, a woman about my age approached me, eyes brimming. "You helped me see I'm not crazy," she whispered. "That matters." "You're not," I said, steady. "You're awake." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the leaves of my young tree. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt wholly, unapologetically, myself. But just as I turned to go inside, a familiar voice called from behind the fence,